Well, I'll go ahead and get started. We got a pretty full room. My name is Adam Carter. I'm the product manager for VDI in the Windows Server org. I've been in this role for about a year and a half. Previously, I was an IT pro evangelist. If you guys have seen the Channel 9 stage, the TechNet Edge stage, that was kind of my previous life before moving over into the product management group. This session is all about what improvements we made in Server 2012 in VDI. When I talk about VDI, I'm including both virtual machine-based virtual desktops, what you kind of think of as classic running a client operating system in a virtual machine, as well as remote desktop services, which we used to call terminal services, but everybody knew what terminal services was, so we changed the name. There is a whole story I can tell, I don't know. Anyway. So yeah, when I talk about VDI, this includes really everything that I talk about is both virtual machine-based and session-based virtual desktops or remote desktop services. Now, am I going to get the clicker right? Am I going to go forward or backwards? I got it right. Okay. There's really three, and you'll see me hit these points. With Server 2012, we did make some tremendous improvements in the way that we did both virtual machine-based and improvements to session-hosted desktops. We did that in three main areas. Efficient management, just get you one console instead of 5 different consoles to manage from. Best value, how do the things that we do in Hyper-V really make this a low-cost solution for doing VDI? I always tell customers, if you're looking at doing virtual desktops to save money, you're going to be disappointed. You're buying server hardware now instead of buying client hardware. It's just going to be more expensive all the way around. That being said, if you choose the Microsoft solution over some of the other ones, we do have some benefits and some things we do that can lower the cost of admission to doing VDI. And then finally, rich user experience. How have we made that better for users? If we give users a slow experience, a laggy experience, if their apps don't work or they don't look the same, they can't use their local devices, they're not going to use it, right? So we made some improvements there, even in low bandwidth scenarios, improving application and device compatibility with remote sessions. Those are the three places that we're going to hit on and talk about today. When we talk about Windows Server 2012, when we talk about it as the cloud OS, there's 4 pillars that we talk about. This one fits in what we call the modern work style. How do you enable your users? They want to bring their own devices. They want to work from their iPad but still access their Windows applications. This is the space that VDI really plays in. And the other ones, you'll see these throughout the week, or you've seen them before, how we've extended virtualization in Windows Server. The power of many servers, simplicity one. This is a marketing slide. I'm going to move on. So just curious, anybody here ever work in a branch or have users that work in a branch environment where when their PC goes down, they're dead. They can't work until IT comes out and fixes their machine? A few heads nodding, some hands raising. Great. Anybody heard of stories or situations where someone lost a laptop or lost a thumb drive that had a bunch of sensitive company information on it? Payroll information, yeah, story. Somebody found a USB drive in a parking lot that had a bunch of payroll information for a school district where I grew up. Anybody have some kind of a tablet deployment, either iOS or Windows RT tablet deployments, and had users disappointed when Windows applications didn't run on that device? Okay, these are really some of the scenarios that VDI sets out to solve. How can we still give users uptime without having to go out and visit them to fix machines that are down? How do we really secure that data, the data that we want to keep in the data center or in the corporation? How do we keep it there? How do we keep it from floating away on thumb drives and stolen laptops or lost laptops? And then application compatibility. How can we get applications out faster, new kinds of applications to these new devices? That's really what we're trying to do with VDI. And at the same time, because you guys are all IT guys, right? That's kind of my career. How do I enable users that way but still keep my job? How do I not become the guy that's in the news because something got lost or stolen, right? How do we balance that, give users what they want with doing it in a compliant, risk-mitigated manner? Okay. I'll go into these in more detail, but when we talk about those 3 pillars, efficient management, low cost, and rich user experience, we'll break out into some of these areas and how we actually enable those. You'll see lots of different ways we do that. We solve a lot of problems in a lot of different ways with Server 2012. Clicker, clicker, clicker. Okay. So let's talk about efficient management. I want to start off with and I'll ask this question, has anybody done a Server 2008 R2 VDI deployment using just the native Microsoft solution? No Citrix, no stop. Oh my gosh, a lot of hands. I am so sorry. So Server 2008 R2, we did release kind of a VDI connector for the remote desktop services broker, and you could use Virtual Machine Manager to provision and create those virtual machines. The Quick Start Guide is about 100 pages long in order to do that. And yeah, you can sit down for a week and you can go through this Quick Start Guide, and at the end of the week you can have a VDI deployment native Microsoft solution. In Server 2012, that 100-page set of steps to get that up and running has been reduced to about 6 clicks. 6 clicks, go get a cup of coffee, when you come back, it's done. We can do it on a single machine. You don't need multiple machines. You don't need to break out your broker, your web access and things onto separate machines, your hypervisor on a separate machine. We can do VDI in a box on one machine, and really it is a 20-minute deployment for you. We've also reduced a lot of the other steps. There used to be about 6 different MMC consoles that you had to go through. As you'll see, it's all just integrated into Server Manager now. Much easier to get things done, not a lot of opening and closing different consoles to deliver that stuff. Okay, and in terms of VDI management, again, making it very easy to manage those collections, automatically set up, your pool machines. We do VDI, I say we do VDI 3 different ways. Personal VMs, you can kind of just think of that as an analog to taking that physical PC, moving it into a virtual machine in the data center. When someone connects into the system, they're always routed back to their PC, their applications, they've got control of it. It's their personal PC just running in a VM now. We also support what we call pooled VDI solutions. They call it linked clones if you're looking at Citrix or Vue's got their own name for it. But this is the idea. I describe VM pools as like hoteling. When I go to a hotel, when I got to the hotel here this week, I went to the front desk, I checked in. They've got hundreds of rooms that are all identical. They route me to a room. I go into that room. It doesn't really matter what I do to that room this week, right? When I can move the bed and put it under the window. I can change the color of the bedspread. When I check out of the hotel, what do? Revert that back to look exactly like every other hotel room here. Pooled VMs you can think of the same way. Doesn't matter what a user does when they log in. Doesn't matter if they try to install applications, if they change their background wallpaper. When they log out, we revert it back to that pristine known state that we specified from our master template as IT. The third way that we do VDI is, of course, remote desktop session host, what we used to call terminal server until everyone figured out what that was, so we changed the name. All 3 solutions, we all manage in the same way. Same console, same tools for how you set up, manage, deploy those. The other thing that we can do, I'll show you a lot of things in the UI and show you what improvements we've made in the UI for managing this. Everything that we do in the UI is also available in PowerShell. So you can completely automate all of these steps. There's a bunch of new PowerShell commandlets for deploying, managing virtual machine collections. Okay. Some of the other things we talked about this, patch storms. This is another thing that we did that's interesting is, one of the problems that you have, there's a couple times you have real problems with a VDI solution. One is 9 a.m. when everybody logs in, and suddenly you've got all this I.O. traffic. Login time is tremendous I.O., so you have all that hitting at once at 9 a.m. The other one is 2 a.m. on Tuesday when the new patches come out, and all of those machines, suddenly you've got 100 VMs or 200 VMs running on the same hardware. They all want to apply a patch and reboot at the same time. Tremendous I.O., tremendous CPU and disk load that happens during that time. If anybody's actually trying to do work at that time while other machines are patching and rebooting, degrades the performance for everybody. So one of the things that we did to solve that is Windows 8 knows when it's running in a VM, and when that patch time comes around, instead of everybody kicking off at 2 a.m. and starting the patch cycle, there's an algorithm that automatically staggers those start times and kind of load balances it over a larger period of time. So we don't kill the performance for everything when that patch comes out. We stagger that. Same with when you refresh your master image. So Service Pack comes out, it's time to update that master image. Instead of killing performance again while we copy that master image to replace all the machines in our collection, we stagger that load automatically for you. You don't have to think about it, we just take care of it for you. You can also wake up machines that are asleep, wake them up, patch them, put them back to sleep, things like that. All happens for you. Much easier experience. So let me jump out. I'd really much rather demo. I'm a demo guy. Let me show you a little bit of what the experience looks like for deploying and setting up VDI. Okay, so this is a Server 2012 machine. I've done very little to it. It's really pretty much out of the box and joined to a domain. But I want to show you what that process is now for deploying VDI. This is the new server manager. You can see right from here I can kick off and add new roles and features. And this is where I say it's 6 clicks and a cup of coffee to do this. So first thing it asks, okay, what do you want to do? You want to do role-based or feature-based installation? If you're familiar with Server 2008 R2 and the add roles and features, this brings you up that same list of checkboxes. Here's all the things you can turn on, put checkboxes next to the ones that you want. We have this other option in Server 2012 to do remote desktop services installations. This is going to kick off a wizard that will automate all of that process for us. All the things that happen as part of deploying VDI, installing and configuring the broker, turning on Hyper-V, turning on IIS so that you can have the web access gateway. This will do all of those configuration steps for us. What used to be a week of work and 100 pages of documentation, all just happens for us right here. So we get 2 choices right off the bat. Do you want to do a standard deployment where you control which machines get which roles and what kind of collection you want to do, pooled or personal? Or do you want to do a quick start? Quick start just builds VDI in a box for us, installs and configures all the roles on one machine, automatically creates a collection for us. I'm going to do that because it saves me about 4 clicks from having to specify all the servers for all the roles. Next question it asks, do you want to do a virtual machine-based deployment? So I want to do a client operating system virtual machine for every user. Or do I want to do session-based? Do I want to do remote desktop session host? I'm going to pick VDI just because it has the extra step in there of where's the virtual machine you want to use as your base template. So I'll pick a virtual machine-based deployment. Now it's asking me which machine I want to put that on. I'm just going to pick the local machine here. Now it's doing an inspection on that machine. It's going to take a look at, is Hyper-V already installed? Is it compatible? Is IIS already installed? Is the network all ready to go? And they finish very quickly. So the next step is, okay, you said you wanted to do virtual machine-based. Now I need that template machine. I need that base virtual machine of Windows 7 or Windows 8 that you want to use as your master image for this collection we're going to create. As it turns out, I already have a Windows 8 image sysprepped and ready to go right here, so I'm going to select it and then click Next. And hey, here's a summary. Okay, I'm going to install the broker, I'm going to install web access, I'm going to install the virtualization host. I just need you to check the box to say you're okay with me restarting because I'm going to install Hyper-V and that's going to require a reboot. And then all I need to do is click Deploy. And at this point, I really am done. At this point, I can go get a cup of coffee, come back in 20 minutes. It'll have a virtual machine collection, the broker, the web access all configured for me. Now, as exciting as it is to watch progress bars for the next 20 minutes, we're going to do it's like a cooking show. Here's one we baked earlier today. I'm going to switch over to another machine that's completed on. This is another server just sitting down here on the floor because I ran out of room up here, where this process is finished. You'll notice we've got a few new items over here. IIS has been installed because that's what the web access gateway uses. And remote desktop services, we have a new option here for that. When I select that, you can see from the overview, nice summary here. Here's all the roles that are configured. I can do some basic configuration from here. If I want to make my web access into a farm, I want more than one IIS server, very easy to add additional web servers here. Same with the broker. I want to make my broker highly available. I want more than one broker so that if that broker goes down, people can still connect to virtual machines. I can add additional brokers here. Configure that for high availability using a SQL server. Now the other thing I've done here, I've actually run both the virtual machine and the remote desktop wizard on this machine. So you can see it's already created 2 collections for me here. This is the quick VM collection based on that virtual machine that I provided earlier. And I went ahead and installed the remote desktop session host on this one as well, just to show that they're both available and can all be run on the same machine. So some of the other things we can see here, I'll start with the session collection server. Here's a summary of that. It's showing that there's currently one machine with a connection in. And a couple other things I can see here. In the case of remote desktop session host, I've gone ahead and published apps. Instead of delivering that whole session host desktop, I've just picked a couple of the apps that were already installed on that machine and said, just publish individual applications instead. And if I look at the VM collection, you'll see some similar information. Because we ran Quick Start, it automatically created that as a pooled desktop. If we do a standard installation or if we create another collection, we can say make those personal desktops instead so that they stay persistent. Every time a user connects, they'll get back to that one they wanted. And you can see over here, it starts by just creating one machine in that pool, but it's very easy for me to say, hey, let's bump that up to, let's add 9 more desktops, or let's add 90 more desktops, or whatever the limit is of my hardware in this case. How many virtual machines can it support at the same time? Very easy for me here to say, hey, boost this up. Let's make this 10 machines in this pool instead of just one. And then if I've got multiple virtualization host servers, I can actually tell it how to split those out. Put 5 on each, or 60% of them on one and not the other. But we won't do that right now. I do have the ability with virtual machine hosted desktops to publish just applications as well. If we have applications, for example, that don't run under terminal server, session host server, I owe a quarter in a jar somewhere for using the old name. If we have applications that just don't run on server because they're blocked and they want to run on a client operating system, we could actually just publish applications that way as well instead of publishing the full Windows desktop. And then the other thing we can do right from here is manage that base template. So we specified the basic template at the beginning. That was our kind of standard client operating system build with our standard applications installed in it and standard policies configured in it. But at some point that'll change, right? Service Pack is going to come out, or we need to patch an application that's in there. With a pooled desktop, this is where I do that from. I update a master image, and then just from here tell it, hey, use this as the new master image. Recreate all those desktops using a new master image. It's going to do an inspection on the machine and say, here are the VMs available. Which one do you want to use as the new master image? I'll just select this first one. And then it's going to say, so when do you want to do this? Do you want me to log everybody off right now and start rebuilding those desktops? Do you want to wait as users log off, create a new desktop for them? Do you want to say, okay, as people log off, but until midnight tonight, that's when we really need to switch everything over, so go ahead and log users out. So we have control over that. When do we actually start delivering those new desktops to users? And then in terms of what the user experience looks like, I'll switch over here to this other machine really quickly. So I just want to show the web access portal. This was automatically created for us. I go to the URL of the server I specified earlier, /rdweb, to get to this page. Go ahead and log in as administrator with my password of ... Now what I'll see is the list of applications and desktops that were published to me. So I should see 3 things if this demo works, right? I should see the quick virtual machine collection pool that we created, and I should also see the 3 applications that were published through Remote Desktop Session Host. Now did I? There we go. Hey, and look, that's exactly what we see. So if I click on an application, for example, the nice thing about Remote App, I get this one warning the first time that, hey, this is happening. But when you'll see when the application starts up, looks like it's running as a local application, even though it's actually running in a session host on the server. Calculator's not that interesting. Let's go ahead and wait for the desktop to show up. Anyway, so here's Calculator. Looks like it's running locally. It's running in this seamless window here, even though it's actually running in the background on the server. I've got shared clipboard between it. I can copy and paste, things like that. Now, what people really care about is, well, what about the virtual machine collection? That was the hard stuff to do before, was doing virtual machines, doing VDI. Show me what that looks like now. So we do get a little, because I didn't do any additional configuration here, it does a little bit of an extra security establishment. I haven't configured single sign-on or anything, so you get a couple of extra prompts there. But what you can see it doing is it's firing up, it's talking to the broker, finding the next available machine in the pool, which in our case there's only one machine to connect to. Brings it up for us here, logs us right in. Awkward. We'll come back, we'll activate Windows later. Hey look, I've got a Windows 8 desktop. Nice thing about Server 2012, Windows 8, we can remote the whole touch experience. This is a touch laptop here. Got some nice fluid scrolling. It supports gestures like shrinking and zooming. Again, because we want to deliver as high fidelity an experience as we can for users. If they feel like this is slow and not as good as a local system, they're not going to want to use it. So we've enabled that. So very simple to set up. That was very easy to do. All we had to do is create a Windows 8 or Windows 7 virtual machine, sysprep it, provide it to the collection creation wizard, and off we go. That was very easy to get set up. I am pulling those sessions from a server right down here on the floor. The question was, where's that magic coming from? It's coming from actually very close. These are all in the same LAN. But don't worry, we're going to talk about user experience in slower network environments as well and talk about how we've improved that. Okay, so this was a very quick tour, but I think the key is, hey, look, it's all in one console, very easy to set up and deploy, very easy to scale this out. As I said, if I reach capacity, if I'm running about 100 virtual machines on a server and it's time to add a second server, all I have to do is say add another virtualization host server. It'll automatically go out, configure that with the Hyper-V role, with the remote desktop virtualization host role, and it'll be there available for me to start adding additional virtual machines to. Same with adding session host. I want to add more terminal servers. I want to add more remote desktop session host servers. That's another quarter in the jar. I can do it right from here. Create that farm. So as you can see, we've got high availability at every point in the solution. We don't have a single point of failure. We can build resilience in everywhere. How am I doing on time? I forgot to start my timer. Well, I'm only 20 minutes in. We're good. Okay, so we talked about efficient management. What do you guys think? Does it look like an easier solution to manage than what we've had in the past? Give me some love. Okay, cool. The next thing I want to talk about is how we've made this the best value. Why should I choose this solution over a VMware View or a Citrix Zen desktop? Maybe I don't need to. Maybe those are the right solutions for me. But I want to talk about what's been built into this solution to really improve that experience for you and make it low cost. There's a few ways that we do that. User profile disk. Remember I talked about pooled VMs as that hotel mentality, and when I log out, we revert that back to the pristine state. User profile disk lets us get the management benefits of pooled VMs, meaning I just have to patch the master image once and tell it to go propagate it everywhere, instead of patching 200 or 300 virtual machines individually because they're persistent. With user profile disk, I can still give users that persistence of their data so that their configuration always follows them, but I can still do it from a single image that I only have to manage and patch one image instead of multiple ones. Fair share. If I have one user do something very processor intensive, I don't want it to kill the experience for everybody else, so fair share helps us balance some of that stuff. And we'll talk about storage and high availability as we go on here, provided I can remember which way to click to go forward. Okay, user profile disk. So I hinted about this a little bit. The idea behind pooled VMs versus personal VMs is very compelling because I only have to patch one image, and that's cool. Instead of having to, if I go with personal VMs, all the problems I had managing physical PCs, I've really just moved to the data center, right? Still have to put antivirus on each one individually. I still have to patch each one individually, deploy applications to them individually. Pooled VMs are great because I just do that once to the master image, and it gets propagated for me everywhere automatically, but I lose all that personalization that users like. Users like to be able to set their own background wallpaper, right? Do you guys let your users do that? Users want to, have their own favorites in IE, and when a pooled environment, they're not always going back to the same machine, so those changes, how do we make sure that stuff follows them? User profile disk is a way we can do that. At a technical level, basically what we do is we take the :users /username directory, and we take the H key current user registry keys. We store those in a separate VHD file. At login time, when they get routed to a new machine, when they hit the broker and they say, I want to fire up my desktop connection, we dynamically mount that VHD with their personalization information in the virtual machine that they've connected to. So it's totally transparent to the user. They save files to the C drive, they add favorites in IE. When they log out, we blow that machine away, we revert that machine back to the gold image before they started, but all of their configuration was stored in a separate file that we just dynamically mount at login time. So you guys are familiar with roaming user profiles? How about user experience virtualization, UEV? Okay, a few hands. You can think of this as kind of a poor man's way to do that. It's limited to just the collection. Nice thing about roaming user profiles and UEV is I can roam between physical machines, virtual machines. I can roam across operating system versions in some cases with UEV, and all that experience follows me. User profile disk just works within the virtual machine collection or session host collection. But it gives you, basically it enables you to get the low-cost benefits, management benefits of pooled VMs, but still give users the personalization that they like from personalized VMs. Okay, just a little bit of information and kind of the key points there as to how it differentiates from roaming user profiles. It really just works within a collection. It's supported on session host as well, so you can do the same thing. You can give users that personalization of their own information within a session-hosted desktop. But again, it's per collection. So even if you've got, like I've got, virtual machines and sessions running on the same server, I actually need two different user profile shares. And that's really all you do to set up a user profile share. It's just, I've actually already set it up on my demo unit. If I come back here to the properties of my quick virtual machine collection that was automatically created for us, I did make one change to it, which was to check the box to say, yes, enable user profile disks, and provided a share. Create a share on the server. When you check that box to say, use that share as my user profile disk share, it actually sets all the permissions on it for you, so users can't get into the share and look at other people's personal directories. Just the broker has access to those and mounts them inside the VM when users connect. But very easy to set up, and off you go. You're ready with, you've got personalization now in pooled VMs. Okay, so fair share. We do this in a couple of ways. If you've got a shared environment, maybe you've got a remote desktop session host server and you've got a bunch of users using it, and then one user starts doing something really CPU intensive, like they start compiling an application maybe, or they start doing a file copy or something else that's really disk I/O intensive. You don't want that to impact the performance of every other user on that machine, right? You don't want everybody's session to slow down because one guy decided to copy his life's work masterpiece and it's 20 gigs over the network. So fair share really just takes care of automatically throttling disk I/O, network I/O, and CPU usage, just watches for any user that's becoming excessively using those to the point that it would impact the performance of other users, and just throttles that for you. You don't have to think about it. It's on automatically. You can turn it off by group policy if you want to, but there's no point. It just works. Keeps one user from impacting negatively everybody else. We say it applies to both sessions and virtual machines. That's really because Hyper-V does the same thing for us in the virtual machine scenario. Hyper-V offers that same functionality. We do it with fair share for session host servers as well. Okay, so storage options. This is a big thing. Because we're building on top of Hyper-V in Server 2012, and Hyper-V has so many new functionalities around what Hyper-V does, and even just storage spaces, which are also in Server 2012, we can get a lot of the same performance and functionality that we got out of a SAN before without having to spend that kind of investment on a SAN. So we can really reduce the cost of doing VDI by using some of the built-in things that we kind of just get to use for free because we built on top of Server 2012. So we can use storage spaces to create redundant storage, and we can actually configure and tune. There's some things, I want my master image because it's got all the I/O happening on it. I want to put that on a solid-state disk on every one of my virtual host servers because solid state will be fast, so that'll help those boot times, it'll help those read times. User profile disks don't need as much fast connectivity because it's really just when a user saves a document, so those don't need to be as fast. How can I put those? Let's put those on slower disks. Let's put that on a lower cost disk. And then finally, we've kind of got our parent VM that's got most of the I/O happening, and then we've got this little Delta child VM for each machine in our virtual environment. We can put those on, again, a faster disk, a more expensive disk, but not solid state, so there's still good performance for those writes and things that have to happen as part of the OS. But we can really mix and match. We really get the best of all worlds here. The other thing is we support putting virtual hard disks. VHD files are supported on SMB share, so I can actually put them on a network share. And I can use the scale-out file server functionality that's in Server 2012 to load balance that across multiple machines. I can use things like CSV, cluster shared volumes, to access those. Cluster shared volumes has some really cool caching technology in it where I can basically allocate part of my RAM as a cache of the data that's on there. So if I've got my master virtual machine, I've got that master VM template sitting on a CSV share, I can tell my host machines, hey, go ahead and allocate 2 gig or 3 gig or 4 gig of RAM to caching that master image. And that way, all of that I/O that happens when people log in, we can have all that happen in RAM instead of having it happen on disk. Increases our performance, increases our density. It means we can get more machines on the same physical hardware because we're not bound as much by disk I/O. Disk I/O is always the biggest problem in VDI. Do you guys find that? Anybody that's doing VDI now, do you agree with me? That's what everybody tells me. I believe it. There's actually a very good session tomorrow that one of my colleagues, Ara, is doing all about scale and performance. He's just finished doing a 2,000-seat VDI deployment, all native Microsoft, no Citrix or anything. He just finished doing that in labs back in Redmond. He's got a session tomorrow at 4, I think in this room, talking about those results and how they got there and some of the things to think about when you're architecting a solution to take advantage of these new storage options. All right, so how do we save costs? You said, I start out and tell people don't do VDI to save money, but then I say, but if you're going to do VDI, we really are the lowest cost reason. What are some of the ways that we do that? If I start with, let's take, for example, personal virtual machines, okay? Almost the worst case scenario for VDI, because really we've just taken all the physical machines, moved them into virtual machines in the data center. All the problems we had with physical machines, we still have now. We still have to patch them. We still have to migrate them. But we get at least personalization for users, and now everything's in the data center, easier to back up, easier to manage potentially. But here's where your cost breakdowns are. You've got a bunch of management costs. You still have to manage them the same way you manage physical PCs. You've got compute costs, which we're going to have that wherever we put them. But now you've got huge SAN storage costs because I've got all those physical PCs, and how much storage is on those? 20 gig, 60 gig. You probably got 10 gig for the operating system, 20 gig for Office, plus whatever other applications and things you have. So you've got that replicated n number of times for every one of the physical machines that you've now migrated to a personal VM. You've got a lot of costs there. How can we reduce the cost? There's a couple of things we can do. You guys familiar with AppV? Wait, is this my AppV slide? Okay. If we add AppV to the solution, AppV 5.0 has this new thing called a shared content store, where now we can have a cache of all those applications that we've packaged in AppV. We can just put those on a network share where everybody accesses those applications from that shared cache instead. That can reduce that storage cost. Why? Because we moved all the applications out of that base image. Now our base images are smaller. We don't have to buy as much space in our SAN to hold that. I talked to a customer recently. It was earlier this year. I talked to a customer. They were doing a VDI deployment. And of course, they had all this new compute and all this new storage that they had to put in there. They took me on a tour of the data center. And I came in and, data center, very dense, very packed, lots of machines. And I looked up at the ceiling and said, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing here? And they said, do you think you're seeing a SAN suspended from the ceiling because there's no more floor space? And I said, yeah, that's what I think I'm seeing. And they're like, yeah, then you are seeing what you think you're seeing. We're out of space. We're hanging storage off the ceiling now. How can we reduce some of that storage? It's a true story. I'm not going to tell you who it was. How can we reduce some of that? Well, let's reduce the size of those images so that we can get some of that storage back. AppV is one way we can do that. So pooled VMs, I'm a big proponent. If you have to do VDI, go with pooled VMs because now I just have to patch one image. It takes care of propagating it for me. So my costs go down. I can still use AppV to provision all my applications. Now my management costs have gone down because I only have to patch one image. My storage costs go down a lot again. Why? Because instead of having 40 gig times 100 virtual machines worth of storage, I have 40 gig for the master image and then like a 1 or 2 gig child file that basically has domain membership information for each of those additional machines. So huge reduction in the storage costs. I turn on application virtualization. I turn on user profile disk, so users still get their personalization. I've saved some money there. If you really want to save money, if you really want to deliver desktops cheaply, session host servers, remote desktops, good old classic terminal server. We manage it all the same way here. You get twice the density on the same hardware. If you can get 100 virtual machines on hardware before you start seeing user performance impacted, you get 200 remote desktop sessions on that same machine. And again, your management costs go down because now you're just patching that one machine instead of having to patch multiple virtual machines in there. All your compute costs go down because you've just got one copy of the operating system running instead of one per user. So you really get some big benefits by going to session host. There's studies out there that say that of every customer that goes out to look at VDI and says, yeah, we're going to do VDI, 70% end up doing session host servers because it just makes sense. The experience is pretty much the same for users, and the density, you'll just kill what you can do with virtual machines. And the technology's been around for, when did NT4 terminal servers come out? 98? Now we've improved the product since then. If the last time you looked at terminal server was in 2000, the performance has come a long way in terms of the protocol and things. But the technology is solid technology that's, you're going to see great application compatibility and performance and things like that. Oh, and then, hey, because we don't need a SAN, we can do everything with direct attached storage, my costs go down even further because I can just use locally attached disks. I don't need to connect it to a SAN. I can buy some cheap disks, buy cheap solid state disks if I really want to push for throughput, and I can save money again. If you're going to do VDI, why is a Microsoft solution a low-cost option for VDI? Here's how. Okay, let's talk a little bit about high availability because that's always, it's always great to say, hey, we're going to move all of the users' stuff into the data center. We're going to move all your PCs into the data center. And then when something goes down in the data center, now you have, one machine goes down and now 200 users can't work instead of one user. How have we improved that? What have we done? As I showed in the console, basically every one of the features can be made redundant. We can put IIS for the web access in a farm. We can put the gateway in a load balance cluster. Create multiple RDVH hosts, that's multiple machines just running Hyper-V, hosting operating system virtual machines. We can scale all those out. The one sticky point that we used to have with the Server 2008 R2 solution was the broker. Because the broker has to know the state of everything that's happening, right? It needs to know which users are connected. Do they already have a virtual machine? Do they already have one running? Is it disconnected? We just need to reconnect them, or do we need to provision a new machine for them? The broker is the one that knows all that information, and that used to be a single point of failure for us because we didn't know how we just didn't have a good solution for how you made that highly available. With Server 2012, what we've done is supported making that highly available with SQL Server clustering. So instead of the broker having its own database that it just kind of tracked all of its own stuff to, now you set up a SQL Server cluster, make your SQL Server highly available, create multiple machines, add the broker role to them, point them all at that SQL Server. Now we've got high availability and redundancy at every point in the solution. That's kind of cool, right? Anything? You guys, tough crowd. I'm after lunch. Everybody's asleep. Okay. So we talked about efficient management. We talked about low cost. Here's where the rubber really hits the road. Are users going to like it? Are users going to look at it and say, this is laggy, this is slow, none of my stuff works, I can't get to my stuff? That's really where this fails, right? If users don't like it, they're not going to use it, and that's where the whole solution fails. So what have you done, Microsoft, to make it better? There's a few places we've made some improvements. Remote FX for WAN is one of them. People always said the RDP protocol was great in LAN environments, wasn't so great in WAN environments. I will say now, I'll talk you through some of the performance improvements we've made for the WAN. We've got a great solution now. Low bandwidth, even down as low as 3G speeds. Intercontinental links with 150 seconds, 200 milliseconds of latency. We can still deliver a great desktop experience. GPU support. In Server 2008 R2, we released Remote FX, which is basically the ability to put GPUs in your servers and virtualize those. Add them as a resource to virtual machines. And it's not a one-to-one mapping. Here's a GPU in the server, and it's mapped to Bob's session or Alice's session. We actually virtualize the GPU too, so multiple sessions can share the GPU in the server. So if you have CAD/CAM stuff that leverages DirectX, we can actually use the server GPUs to improve that performance. If you don't have GPUs in your server, with Windows 8, we emulate it on the CPU. So you take a little bit of a performance hit because now the CPU is doing all that extra processing. But you can still get some graphic-intensive performance happening without a GPU, but it's even better if you've got GPUs in your server. USB to redirection, seamless experience. I'll talk about those here in just a bit in more detail. But let me talk about the WAN improvements, because this is really a big thing. Like I said, people always said, you're fine in the LAN, but then once we hit the WAN, it gets too slow, it's slow to reconnect, it just doesn't work great. So we made a bunch of improvements in what we do over the WAN. There's a few different ways that did I skip slides? Remote app, we talked about that. I want to go to okay. How do we do that? How do we fix our performance over the WAN? We did it a few different ways. One of them is, instead of capturing the entire screen and just kind of trying to compress the entire screen and send it down the wire, we actually look at the content on the screen now. If I take a standard web page, I've got a bunch of text on here. I can put that in a different codec. I can compress text really, really tiny, decompress it on the back end, and not have any pixelation or any issues with it. I've got graphics here. Graphics I can put in a different codec so that, as they come in, they don't have to be, I can just compress them differently than the way I compress that. And finally, video. I've got, in this case, it's a flash ad. We actually pull out all these components. We render them each in a different codec and deliver them to the endpoint. As a result, we get a better experience for users. Do you guys remember, anybody remember surfing the web over dial-up? Yeah, I love that. Thanks for your hands. You remember how images used to do this when you over dial-up? You'd get this really blurry image, and it would progressively get better as the download finished. If we detect, and it's all dynamic over the RDP protocol, if we detect that network conditions are really low, we'll start doing the same thing with graphics. Your text always stays clear, because we put text in a different codec, and we don't degrade the appearance of text, but we actually will do this same thing with graphics. Some of the other things that we do with video, we solve video a couple different ways. Where's my video slide? So, let's say, for example, I'm working at home on my laptop, which is a perfectly capable laptop, or it's my home PC. It's perfectly capable of playing YouTube video or doing MPEG video playback. And I need to launch a video in my remote session. So if you think about everything that happens when you do compressed video playback on the internet, it doesn't make sense for the server in my data center to download that data stream, decompress it, decode it, and then try to push that uncompressed video down the remote desktop connection to my endpoint, if my endpoint is perfectly capable of doing that video decoding itself. So we actually do that now. If we determine that the endpoint is capable of doing the video decoding and playback, we let the endpoint do it. We don't decompress and render that on the server. We just redirect that stream to the endpoint and let the endpoint do it. And things like Windows media files, we just redirect automatically. If you've got other formats, you've got QuickTime, you've got Flash video, we'll actually transcode that on the server. So we'll take that video playback on the server, we'll encode it in our MPEG codec, H.264 codec, and we'll push that down and we'll let the endpoint do the decoding. So again, you get very high fidelity playback. Some of the other things that we do now, we actually switch. If we detect that video is playing, if we've got capability of doing UDP traffic from the server to the client, we'll switch video to the UDP signal, or the UDP protocol instead of TCP. So when you think about it, if I'm playing a video and I've got a lot of packets dropping, TCP is going to want to resend all of those packets, right? A bunch of packets didn't arrive, so resend them. Well, if I'm watching a video, I don't really need those packets 2 or 3 seconds later as my video is playing because I've moved along in the video. So by switching to UDP traffic, now if we drop some packets, we don't need to resend them. That reduces our bandwidth tremendously, gives us a great experience for video playback without impacting the WAN. It gives us a good experience of the desktop, even over low bandwidth and high latency connections. And I will show you a little bit of a demo of that. USB redirection is pretty much just built in. Now you can control that as an administrator. If you want to control which devices people can access plugged in locally that they can access in their remote session, you do have control over that. But basically, by default, any USB device you plug in locally, you can access in that remote session. Printers, scanners. If you can think of a USB device, it should just work in that remote session, accessing it from over the remote desktop. And that's same with terminal server. We actually fixed that in remote desktop session host as well. If I plug a USB drive in, only my session has visibility to that USB drive. It doesn't show up as available to every other user that has an active session on that server at that time. Works with cameras, works with really just about anything. Okay, I talked about the remote FX vGPU. If you've got GPUs in servers, great. We can take advantage of them in those remote sessions. let me show you a little bit of a demo of what some of that experience looks like. So the question is, which devices support the RDP protocol? Oh, the remote FX enhancements. Okay, so we license the protocol. It's built into the Windows clients. So Windows 7, Windows 8 RDP, they'll take advantage of remote FX out of the box. You can look, there's a remote FX logo, and you can look for other compatible thin client devices or RDP client applications that support remote FX. Basically, if they support RDP 8, you get all this functionality. Okay, let's see if this demo stayed alive. Looks good. Okay, as you can see here, I've opened 2 remote desktop sessions side by side. Windows 8 on the left, Windows 7 on the left, Windows 8 on the right. And I want to just show you a little bit of what some of the experience looks like. Now, as we said, I'm on a LAN right now, so we should expect pretty good performance. Now I'm going to show off my mad HTML development skills here by showing you a web page I created to host a video file, because I wasn't sure. Usually I do this demo over and just fire up a YouTube video on both sides, but we're having such good luck with performance of the internet here in Vegas that I've got a local server, and I'm just going to stream a video here. And you can see Windows 7 on the left, Windows 8 on the right. They both look great. We've got good throughput on both of them. If I bring up Task Manager, you can see we're pushing about 7 megabits of data to deliver these two. You see that spike up and down a little bit as some caching and buffering happens on those clients. Now I'm going to do something a little bit painful to these sessions. I'm going to bring up a network emulator. When I hit play here, I'm going to throttle that network connection down to 5 megabit connection with 100 milliseconds of latency. So I've got 2 sessions, so those are each going to go to about 2.5 megabits of transfer available to them. That's what I have at home on DSL. I'm going to hit play on that to start that. And you should see some things right away. You'll notice that Windows 8 hiccuped for just a minute while it detected that the network conditions had changed, and then it just kept going. Windows 7's having a little bit of a harder time. It's still using the TCP protocol. It still thinks it needs to send every packet, wait for every packet to play. You can see that it's got just a little bit of hiccup there, and you can see it slowed down. It's not keeping up with the other one anymore. If I turn the emulator back off, usually what we see is the Win 7 one suddenly gets all those packets and tries to catch up really fast. Oh, I meant to bring up. You can see there, when I had the network emulator on, you can see where the traffic was throttled and then spiked back up there for a minute when we turned it back. And then it's kind of, if I go ahead and, which one do I pause? If I pause the Windows 8 video and just leave the Windows 7 one running, you'll see the network traffic is almost unchanged because the Windows 8 one is so efficient. Even in LAN environments, the Windows 8 is so much more efficient with its protocol usage. You barely notice the difference in network consumption when just the Windows 7 video is playing, or in this case, stopped playing. Come on, play, baby, play. Where are you going? Anyway, so you can see that you see performance improvements there. I do some other demos where I turn it down even further, and you can see we do some much better caching as well for sessions, so you can still get good experiences in even lower latency environments. Now, the good news is, I don't know, who here is planning a Windows 8 deployment? That's okay. It's okay that there's none. That's all right. All of the RDP 8 improvements we released as an update for Windows 7. So you can still get that same performance that you're seeing on Windows 8 with Windows 7 virtual machines. If you look at the RDS team blog, there's a post that tells you how to do it. But basically, there's a Windows 7 update. Download that update. You apply a group policy to turn on RDP 8, and you'll get that same performance that I showed for Windows 8 on your Windows 7 virtual machines as well. You're welcome. Okay, how am I doing for time? I feel like I'm talking and talking. We got lots of time. We got some time to do some Q&A, I think. Let me just wrap up with a couple of things. Here's the things that we talked about. We talked about why we made management easier for you guys as IT pros. We talked about why we made VDI a lower cost solution to make your finance people happy. And we talked about the user experience and all the things we've done to make this better for your users as well. Do encourage you to go out to Microsoft.com/VDI, download it. Like I said, one server, very easy on one server to get all this up and running. The demos I did here were all from a single server host. Very easy to get this stuff up and running. And there's some more information. And then I think I have a resource slide. Oh yeah, don't forget to fill out your evals, please. You'll win stuff. And I just wanted to call out, there's a couple of other sessions I wanted to let you guys know about. I mentioned earlier, tomorrow Ara is doing a session on scale and architecture. He just built a 2,000-seat deployment, and he'll go through kind of all the results he found for that, where the bottlenecks were, how they solved problems with disk I/O, things like that. There's another session on Wednesday on optimizing your image. Windows 8, as I mentioned earlier, Windows 8 knows that it runs in a virtual machine, and so it changes some of its behaviors automatically. But there's still some things you can do to reduce the disk I/O in Windows 8 so that you, again, can reduce that disk I/O, get more scalability, more density in terms of number of virtual machines per server. And then Dell actually has a session as well on Thursday where they talk specifically about their solution. You can buy a Dell 1,000-seat VDI deployment. They've got a part number. Order the part number, buy the Dell DVS 100, and they will give in, they'll drop off a rack full of servers, and you've got 1,000 seats of VDI right there. So there's sessions on all of those this week. And that's kind of, I mean, we can do some Q&A. What questions do you guys have? What didn't I cover? What do you guys want to talk about? Question here. There is a microphone if people don't want to holler, or you can yell and I'll just repeat the questions.
Yeah, so why wouldn't I want to use my app V in place of this new features in 2012?
Why would I not want to use app V?
Yeah, I mean, what's keeping me on app V? Is it more, are you saying app V is more robust than what we can do in Server 2012?
No, you want to use both. You want to use app V in conjunction. Keep using app V because then you can deliver applications to any of your Windows machines. But then if you've got users that aren't on Windows because they want to access stuff from home or they want to access stuff from their iPad, still use app V to deliver applications into these virtual sessions that they can access.
Well, my dilemma more nowadays is I have a lot of legacy applications that can't even be virtualized. Are there any improvements in 2012 and app V 5.0 for that matter that are going to allow me to bring over some of the legacy apps?
I'm not an app V expert. I'm not sure what changes they've made. I would encourage you to there's an MDOT booth in the expo hall that's got some app V experts. I'll be there as well. Thanks guys for coming. If you have other questions for me, I'll be at the expo hall in the desktop vert booth tonight. They'll have more answers for you about app V and what the improvements are there.
Right.
The shared cache is the big one in terms of how it lights up for VDI, because now we can reduce that base image by taking all that cache and just sharing it amongst multiple machines.
Thanks.
It's a big one in my mind. Another question here. Any clue what that session is that Ara is doing? It is, I think I've got the name right. Designing a VDI architecture for scale and performance is the name of the session. I think it's 4 o'clock tomorrow in this room. I can't back that part up. I don't know if it's in this room, but it's at 4 o'clock tomorrow. Question over here. Okay, so the question is, what are the system requirements to do this? Do I need Server 2012? The answer is yes. Can the rest of my environment be 2008? Yes. We don't have any Active Directory schema changes or anything. There's no dependencies there. All you need to do is drop in 2012 for your virtualization for your VDI servers. Everything else can be 2008. We support Windows 7 SP1 and Windows 8 as the guest VMs. If you want to virtualize XP, talk to our friends at Citrix. We'll go to the microphone here.
The USB redirection in session hosts, does it support composite devices? What happens in the event of a Bloomberg keyboard that's got part that should stay local and part should be redirected?
Interesting question. So I've got a composite device, like a Bluetooth keyboard. I want some of it. Basically what we do is we just remote the USB bus.
Yeah.
So anything that's plugged into the USB port, we'll just remote that. And you will need to install the drivers remotely. Basic input, keyboard and mouse, those drivers are already there, but your webcam you'll have to install drivers for in the remote session host server. Okay. Who else? Let's go over here to these guys. Are there any incompatibility, any issues with using roaming profile with user profile disk? No, you can use them both in conjunction if you wanted to. You could turn on both, and it'll just use the user profile disk as the local cache for RUP. Okay. Did you have a question too, or the same one? Okay. Let's go back to the microphone and then here.
Is there ever a reason when you're doing a VM-based deployment to not cluster your Hyper-V hosts?
Is there a reason to not cluster your Hyper-V hosts? Yeah, you actually don't need to cluster your Hyper-V hosts. Okay. If you're doing pooled VMs, where we don't care about the state, we blow it away anyway, those don't need to be clustered. You just set up a bunch of servers, and they're all going to have the same identical virtual machines running on them.
Okay. Your graphics still said clustered.
What's that?
Your graphics still said clustered. That's why I asked.
Oh, it could be farmed. It doesn't have to be a cluster. If you're doing personal VMs and you actually want them to fail over if one goes down, then you'd cluster them. But even then, you could use shared nothing migration in Hyper-V, and you still wouldn't necessarily need to. So it depends on how automatic you want it to happen. Question here. What are the client connection requirements? Yeah, so pretty much every Windows operating system has the terminal server client in it, the RDP client. To get the performance improvements, you need Windows 7 SP1 or Windows 8. And XP1 should still work. If you're going older than XP, some of them aren't going to talk to the broker correctly, and some of those things don't work. We have a Mac client. It's a really old, crappy one that doesn't support the broker. Sorry.
That was going to be my question, actually. Are you ever going to support it? Because I've got users that are beating me up about it.
There's 3 questions I always know I'm going to get when I do this session.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I thought about it. I'm like, I should just make my 3 question answers because I know I'm going to get these questions about non-Windows clients. We focus on making great Windows clients. We've got some great partners. We license the RDP protocol. There's some great partners out there making clients. The App Store for your non-Windows device of choice, Android, iOS. There's clients out there with varying levels of remote effects and performance support and things like that. iTap is one of the companies that I recommend a lot. Wise has their whole Pocket, I guess it's Dell now. Dell Quest Wise has their Pocket Cloud line of clients. They've got a client for all the major operating systems. Most of them have a free one, and then they have a for pay one as well. But there's lots of options out there. We focus on great Windows clients. I know it's not the answer you want to hear. There were 3 questions? Okay, so the first question I always get, well, the 3 questions that I get are, do I still need Citrix? And the answer is, depends. There's a couple of things there. Non-Windows clients is the obvious one, because Citrix makes a client for everything. Operating system support is the other one, because we really support Windows 7, Windows 8, and Server 2012. If you've still got old 2003 terminal servers, if you want to do XP virtual machines, Zen Desktop is the solution for that kind of work. They can manage multiple versions within the same console. And those are really the key ones. The other thing to be available, how big, okay, who's got a VDI deployment either that they want to do or that they've got in production now? Okay, raise your hand if it's bigger than 500 seats. Okay, is it bigger than 1,000 seats? Is it bigger than 5,000 seats? Okay, you guys still need Citrix. No. Our console, our management console, was designed for a 500-seat deployment. It's been tested up to 5,000 seats. So all the console that you saw there, they designed it with 500 seats in mind. It still works up to 5,000 seats. But the experience gets a little slow. When it has to populate that window of active machines and it's got to drop 5,000 machines in it, it's a little slow. When a user says, hey, my session is hung, I need you to reboot it, we don't have great filtering or sorting, and you're going to have to scroll through those 5,000 machines to find their machine to reboot it. Now, that's all available in PowerShell. I said everything you can do in the GUI, you can do through PowerShell. So if you've got a big environment, you probably want to automate a lot of that stuff anyway. The PowerShell script is there to do it. But if you want to do everything through the UI, just be aware our friends at Citrix help you with those very large deployments. The third question I get is licensing, and I don't know how much time we have left, but it's not enough. Okay. Question back here?
How long does it take to provision machines? Especially when you update the master image, how long does it take that?
How long does it take to provision the machines? It's really a feature of disk I/O and how much disk I/O that you do. There is, by default, it does it serially. It only creates one at a time. There is a registry key that you can change to have it do multiple simultaneously, which speeds up your time. If you're doing it seriously, yeah, it's really just a matter of how big your base VM is. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on where it's got to copy it from and how big it is. But you can crank up the number that it does consecutively. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay. Like I said, I'll be down at the in the exhibition hall in the desktop vert booth. I'll be there tonight. If you've got other questions, you can swing by and ask. I'll be in Ara's session, and I'll be popping in and out of the other sessions this week if you have other questions.
I had just one more. When you're migrating from a physical environment to a VDI environment, how do you get the data from the physical machine into the data center?
How do you pull the data out of the physical machine to get it into the virtual machine? Yeah. Tools like the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit have all of the capability of doing that. There's the user state migration tool, which is a command line that you can run against physical machines that'll pull out all the user document settings. There's the Easy Transfer Wizard if you want to do it through a GUI one at a time. But the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit will have all the resources you need for doing that.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, guys, all so much for coming. Have a good conference.